Part 7. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 61. Can you let me take a look? Kaylan asked immediately. Of course, but I hope you don't have too high expectations. Why? The reason why the diving cabin is still on the ship is because it is too heavy to be carried by the Security Bureau's plane. However, they have removed all the equipment and lining inside the diving cabin, leaving only an iron-shelled. Caroline answered for Zofia. Even if it's an iron shell, I still want to see it. Since you are so insistent, let First Officer Caroline take you there. Zofia handed the keycard to Caroline. I still have to deal with the aftermath of the battle just now, so I won't accompany you for the time being. Cargo hold number 9 is located at the bottom of the Pioneer icebreaker. There are completely sealed drainage compartments at the front and rear. There is only one lift freight elevator that can reach it. However, what makes Kaylan speechless is that even this freight elevator has been stopped. After using it, they can only climb down step by step along the elevator shaft. It was people from the Security Bureau who did it. Not only did they dismantle the power supply system, they also sealed the entire number 9 cargo bay. This key card was also the captain's secretly hidden backup card, said Caroline. She has not taken off her power armor until now. Fortunately, in order to transport goods, the elevator shaft was originally designed to be very spacious. Not to mention the power armor, even a small mecha can easily pass through it. Just for such an iron shell, Kaylan couldn't help but complained in his heart, these people from the Security Bureau are too cautious, right? That's not all, there are also a lot of rock samples collected from the seabed by the Security Bureau's robots in the number 9 cargo hold. But I really don't know what the use of those things is. They are heavy and take up space. I really want them. Send a transport ship over immediately to take away all this garbage. Caroline inserted the card into the slot on the cargo door, and the 3 red indicators on the side turned green one by one. Amidst a harsh sound of metal friction, the thick hatch slowly rose. Fortunately, the people from the Security Bureau were not so crazy as to weld the entire cargo hatch shut. Didn't you say there is only one diving cabin? What's going on with those rocks? Kaylan was a little confused. Just now in the captain's room, Zofia didn't mention these rocks at all. There was no mention of these rocks in Caroline's mouth. In the eyes of knowledgeable people, garbage that has a useful purpose is considered a precious environmental specimen. Oh, those rocks were not collected on the seabed of the sea area. They should have nothing to do with the ruins of the underwater city. Of course, if you are interested in these things, you can take them as you like. Anyway, there are a lot of them. A few are missing. Those people from the Security Bureau won't find out, Caroline said as she took the lead into the cargo hold. The large space in the cargo hold is about the size of 2 basketball courts, and the air is filled with a strong smell of rust and engine oil, mixed with a hint of the fishy smell unique to Alpha Star seawater. Then were all the seabed rock samples around the undersea city transported away by the Security Bureau. It's not that they transported it away, Caroline shrugged, it's that they never got that thing at all. This ruins is very evil. As long as the robot gets close, various malfunctions will occur, such as sensor failure, engine stalling, etc. It's all relatively light, and some simply interrupt the signal and disconnect the cable, making it impossible to recover even if you want to. As for the living people, alas, no one can return to the water alive. This is not considered evil, Kaylan explained. Many of the Alpha civilization ruins will have abnormal magnetic fields around and inside them. This will have a great impact on precision electronic equipment. Otherwise, at least 80% of the hunters' jobs will be lost. The robot robbed it? Huh? What about the remaining 20%? Caroline asked with interest. There are some ruins of mechanical robots that cannot be dealt with. They are dead objects after all, even if there are people behind them. There is another aspect, and that is the cost issue. In many cases, Human life is much cheaper than those top-level robots, Kaylan replied. That's right. Otherwise, all the sailors and boatmen on our ship can be replaced by robots, which will save me from shouting at the top of my voice all day long. Caroline nodded in agreement. As they chatted, the four of them had already walked to the middle of the cargo hold. On one side was the almost completely deformed spherical diving cabin that Kaylan had seen in the video, and on the other side was the pile of deep dive tanks piled up like a hill. Black rocks. Be careful. At this time, Asano Akira suddenly took a step forward and protected Kaylan. What's going on? Kaylan frowned slightly, but out of trust in Asano Akira, he also pulled out the pistol inserted under his ribs and turned on the safety. There's something moving inside that pile of rocks. Akira Asano had already pushed the sword out of its sheath 3 inches. How is that possible? Those people from the Rock Security Bureau have been screened several times. Caroline shook her head repeatedly. Could you be too nervous and read it wrong? I heard it, Asano Akira replied. Then, did you hear that wrong? Caroline's smile was a little stiff. She suddenly discovered that the 3 people she brought down had already entered a fighting state just because of such a sentence. Another hunter with a Chinese appearance, even they already had impact grenades in their hands. Don't be impulsive, don't use weapons here. If the ceiling partition of the drainage compartment is damaged, the entire Pioneer will be in big trouble, Caroline dissuaded. Ms. Caroline, you'd better put on your helmet, Kaylan said to Caroline without looking back, because he noticed that Asano Akira's war blade had been unsheathed to 5 inches. This was the starting move of the improved version of IAI/. There's nothing there, Caroline said with a hint of sullenness in her tone. My power armor has a biological scanning device, and there's no sign of life in that pile of rocks. Just because it can't be scanned doesn't mean it's definitely not there. Kaylan pulled the slide and loaded the bullet. But those stones were all looked through by people from the Security Bureau one by one. If there was something inside, it would have been discovered long ago, Caroline shouted. What if they were negligent? Ian's first thought was of flesh-eating worms. When he saw the priestess for the first time, he couldn't see anything abnormal at all. The flesh-eating worms parasitic in her body. As long as the flesh worms have not yet begun to devour the host's flesh and blood, it is difficult for outsiders to detect them. In the same way, if there are some inconspicuous little things embedded in the cracks of a rock. Come out. Before Akira Asano could finish his words, he had already rushed forward with a single lunge. At the same time, the sword was unsheathed, and an arc-shaped crescent formed by the sword's light appeared in front of him. Chiang, the sound of metal and stone clashing echoed in the cargo hold. A gray-black shadow that was almost the same color as the rock quickly retracted after colliding with Asano Akira's war blade and hid behind the pile of rocks. Then, what is that? Caroline looked in disbelief. It was too fast, I didn't see clearly. Kaylan shook his head. It seems to be a person, Liao Zilang said with some difficulty, but, it seems to only have the upper body. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 62. Are you sure? Kaylan stared at the pile of rocks and asked in a low voice. He was right. Caroline swallowed with some difficulty. The camera of the power armor captured the image of that thing. It was a human skeleton, but only the upper body. Skeleton. Kaylan quickly searched for relevant clues in his memory, however, he couldn't find any close results. A skeleton, how does it move? He couldn't help but think of the corpse controlled by the parasite in the A-087 ruins, but the problem was that even in that case, the corpse could move on its own but had to rely on the continuous contraction and relaxation of muscles that had not yet decayed. That's right, it's impossible to move with just a single frame without muscles, fascia, tendon sheaths, and other tissues. Skeleton monsters that can jump and run around only exist in fantasy worlds and supernatural works. If they want to appear in the real world, there is only one possibility. Supporting the movement of the skeleton is a mechanical system that relies on external energy supply. Just like the powered exoskeleton invented by humans. But this possibility was directly rejected by Kaylan. Even if the Security Bureau was not confident about these rock specimens, they could have left a few agents to guard them, and there was no need to secretly hide such a thing in the rock pile. That shouldn't be a human skeleton, what you see may be its exoskeleton, Kaylan concluded. I've never seen such an indigenous creature. There was a hint of fear in Caroline's tone. Even the female first mate who dared to fight to the death with the giant eel in the deep sea would inevitably panic when facing unknown things. Generate some feelings of fear. It's not just you, we haven't seen that thing before. Kaylan turned to look at Caroline and saw that she had taken off the gauze rifle hanging from the back of the power armor. First mate, are you sure? The weapon in your hand will not penetrate the sealed partition of the drainage compartment. Ah, I'm sorry, I'm just a little nervous. Caroline was stunned for a moment, hung up the gauze rifle with some hesitation, waved her hands, and 2 half-meter-long mantis knives suddenly fell from her arms. The armor popped out. Here we go again. It was Asano Akira who issued the warning in advance, but this time he did not move forward to meet the enemy, but took a sharp step back diagonally, blocking Ian's body. Kaylan. His target is you, Liao Zilang shouted at the same time, but he did not throw out the impact grenade in his hand. Instead, he unfolded a folding shield to protect Ian's other side. The sword in Akira Asano's hand was crossed, and the crisp collision sound sounded again. The black shadow retreated with one blow, but this time it did not choose to hide, but perched on the highest point of the pile of rocks, looking down at the 4 of them. This time, Kaylan finally saw the appearance of that thing clearly. This thing is really a mutilated human skeleton. Its main body is a human spine that has been cut off at the waist, with incomplete ribs connected to both sides. The clavicle, scapula, and humerus are relatively intact, but the radius and pubic bone are weirdly twisted and intertwined, with a pair of sharp bone claws. It is 3 to 4 times as long as a normal human finger. Looking up from the cervical spine, you can see a half-broken skull, with all the parts above the cheekbones missing. The upper and lower jaws are tightly meshed together, but the teeth are exactly the same as those of normal people, including incisors, canines, and front and rear molars. Neatly arranged on the gums. This is obviously a human skeleton, Caroline exclaimed in a low voice. It's not that simple. Kaylan observed the skeleton carefully. Except for the changes below the elbow, the overall material of the skeleton looked very different from human bones. The entire skeleton was gray. Black, the surface is relatively rough, and the surface is densely covered with fine pores. At a glance, it is very close to those rock samples. Could it be that this thing is made of rock? This is not without precedent. They have encountered strange pieces of meat that can turn into hounds and Asano Akira before. Although this part of the memory is only owned by Kaylan, judging from various signs, it all really happened. Rather than the so-called hallucination. Those chunks of meat that turned into humanoid forms acquired human genetic genes by absorbing human blood, and assimilated their own cells to continuously decompose and proliferate. However, no matter how weird the chunks of meat are, they are still a kind of living thing, and as a dead thing, how did the rock change into a mutilated human skeleton? Moreover, this skeleton with only half the skull remaining seems to have complete self-awareness, and it even adopts tactics such as ambush. Not only that, after it fought against Asano Akira for the first time and failed to gain an advantage, it immediately changed its attack target. This thing not only has the ability to think, but also has a high IQ. This just confirms Ian's initial judgment. This thing is an unknown creature from Alpha Planet, which has a peculiar mimicry ability and disguises itself into the appearance of a human skeleton. If only I could know the name of this thing. In this case, maybe the relevant information will pop up directly from the depths of my mind like last time. Kaylan can roughly determine that the triggering condition for that situation is to silently pronounce the name of the thing he sees in Alpha language. This is like entering keywords in the search bar of a search engine, but the problem now is that he don't know what this keyword is. Black human skeleton? Regardless of whether this keyword is correct or not, Kaylan suddenly discovered that in the language of Alpha civilization, there was no word human at all, and he did not know how to describe this unknown intelligent species from an unknown planet. Black alien skeleton? That would be even more irrelevant. As if by chance, a thought suddenly came to Ian's mind: what would happen if he tried to communicate with the creature in front of him in Alpha language? Will it understand? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 63. The language of Alpha civilization is like an innate instinct for Kaylan. This language has been deeply imprinted in his thinking. He said it without even thinking. It was a very hoarse hissing sound, just like the sound made by snakes when spitting messages. It was not made by the vocal cords, or even from the throat. This hissing sound, the whispers, echoed in Ian's brain, and except for himself, the other three seemed not to hear them at all. Come over. I order you to come over. He wasn't sure whether he was talking or just fantasizing, but the hissing whisper became louder and clearer. Kaylan felt as if something was lingering in his head. A giant snake is constantly swallowing bright red letters. The next second, the black skeleton rushed towards him, its arms spread out, as if it was coming to hug Kaylan, but the 10 long and sharp bone claws were directed towards him. Folded inwards, the moment it hugs Kaylan, Ian's body will be pierced and torn apart by these 10 bone claws. Can it hear the whispers echoing inside its own head? Did it understand? Or, is this just a spontaneous attack that has nothing to do with its own attempts? Kaylan was still standing there in a daze, and Akira Asano had already rushed forward with his sword in hand. The 10 bone claws and the sword made of nino alloy had collided dozens of times in the blink of an eye. This time, the black skeleton did not choose the strategy of retreating with one blow, but fought with Asano Akira. The continuous trembling sound replaced the crisp collision sound between the sharp blades, and the speed of both parties increased instantly. To the extreme, it even brought up a string of after images. Its target is not me, Asano Akira said while waving his knife. Its attack has not yet tried its best, it has been looking for opportunities to get rid of me. Kaylan, look at the posture of that thing just now, it's obviously coming towards you. Liao Zilang raised his shield in front of Kaylan. This makes no sense, you didn't even attack it. Maybe you think I'm the weakest one. After all, you have to pick the weakest persimmon. Kaylan made up a reason casually. Does this thing still have the ability to distinguish between strong and weak? It doesn't even have eyes, Caroline said, very puzzled. Who knows, is there more weirdness in this thing? Kaylan retreated continuously under the cover of Liao Zilang. At the same time, he once again ordered the black skeleton in the language of Alpha civilization. Stop attacking, I order you to stop attacking immediately. Ah, Kaylan suddenly felt a stabbing pain deep in his head. He stumbled and fell backwards to the ground. I don't know if it was an illusion. He seemed to have shifted his perspective to the body for a moment. Black skeleton body. He seemed to see the dense sword light coming towards him. Asano Akira pursed his lips tightly, his face expressionless. What exactly is going on? Are you okay? Caroline on the side quickly helped Kaylan up from the ground. It's okay, I accidentally tripped over a rivet. Kaylan raised his head and saw a bone claw that had been cut off from the root lying on the ground not far away. The fracture of the bone claw was very flat and smooth, vaguely visible. I saw some transparent semi-fluid substance flowing out of it and dripping on the ground. When did Asano Akira chop off that bone claw? Why didn't I notice it just now? Kaylan turned around and asked. Just now, the moment you fell, the thing's movements paused for a moment. Asano Akira originally wanted to cut off the spine directly, but the thing quickly recovered at the cost of a bone claw. Blocked Asano Akira's attack, Liao Zilang replied. A moment's pause. Could it be that moment when he just changed his perspective? Could he really invade the consciousness of that black skeleton? Ian's heartbeat couldn't help but speed up a bit. He forced himself to stand up straight and broke away from Caroline's support. If he could really invade at the consciousness level, could he control that? With a black skeleton? Just when he tried to try again, he was shocked to find that he had temporarily lost the ability to language. The sharp stabbing pain just now made his mind a mess, although his consciousness was very clear. But there was a huge blank in his brain. This blank space made him feel at a loss, as if a normal person suddenly forgot how to open his mouth to speak. In medicine, this symptom is called aphasia. The cause of aphasia is that the part of the patient's brain responsible for language function has been damaged or pathological. The patient cannot organize language to express his or her thoughts, nor can he or she understand the meaning contained in other people's words. This symptom has nothing to do with sensory organs. It is a cognitive language disorder. Just like Kaylan now, he can recall every character and syllable in alpha language, but he cannot connect these characters and syllables together into a complete sentence. This feeling was very uncomfortable. This blank space almost drove Kaylan crazy. The unspeakable hysteria put him on the verge of collapse. "Are you okay? Your breathing seems to be rapid," Caroline asked worriedly. I'm fine." Kaylan shook his head vigorously, but it was completely unconvincing. Not only did his breathing speed up, but his whole body began to tremble slightly. The blank space in his brain seemed to have turned into a black hole, devouring everything crazily. The more Kaylan paid attention to it, the faster it devoured it. If this continues, Ian's self-awareness will soon be annihilated. No. It must stop. However, it seems that only by completely forgetting it can we slow down the speed of the black hole swallowing it. But in this case, how can we forget it? It's like seeing something extremely terrifying. The more you want to forget it, the more profound your memory will be. The more Kaylan resists, the stronger the black hole's gravity becomes. "Caroline. Give me your power armor's emergency cooling tank," Kaylan said through gritted teeth. His ferocious expression almost startled the female first mate. What do you want to do?" Although Caroline asked, she still pulled out the emergency cooling tank from the slot and handed it to Kaylan. The emergency cooling tank contains liquid nitrogen at temperatures below 0 and above 100 degrees Celsius, which is used to cool down overheated power armor in emergencies. "Go kill that guy." Kaylan grabbed the cooling tank and rushed towards the black skeleton who was still fighting with Asano Akira without looking back. Only madness can suppress madness. Instead of fighting the black hole in your consciousness, it is better to just leave it behind. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 64. Akira Asano. Back off. Kaylan shouted loudly, and at the same time took out a grenade with a red shell from his body, and threw it towards the black skeleton with all his strength. This is a special small incendiary bomb. Ever since they encountered a swarm of crackjaws in the last ruins, this thing has become the standard equipment of Kaylan and the others. Boom! The incendiary bomb exploded the moment it hit the black skeleton. A large amount of sticky oily substance firmly adhered to the surface of the skeleton and burned violently. The filler in the projectile is a mixture of white phosphorus, magnesium thermic agent and modified rocket propellant fuel, which can release high temperatures exceeding thousands of degrees when burning. Not only that, this incendiary bomb is also effective in water. It only takes one to heat more than a dozen tons of seawater to boiling point. The blazing black skeleton is like an evil ghost crawling out of purgatory in a horror movie. It has a strong visual impact, especially the skeleton half wrapped in flames, which reminds Kaylan of the rider. The ghost rider is riding a motorcycle and wielding a chain. It was an old movie shot in the old era. The video file was found by Kaylan in a scrapped antique hard drive. He originally just wanted to study the hardware structure of old computers, but he didn't expect to end up with hundreds of movies from the old era. Pirated movies. The video file was severely damaged, but with today's data recovery technology, it is not difficult to repair. The first movie that was repaired was Ghost Rider from Columbia Pictures. After Kaylan watched this movie, he had a bad taste in mind that he wanted to use a fire extinguisher to wash the Ghost Rider's hair. Now, this idea can finally be realized in reality. After releasing the safety lock and turning the flow regulating valve to the maximum setting, Kaylan also threw out the cooling tank in his other hand. The liquid nitrogen in the cooling tank splashed out, just falling on the burning black skeleton. Laugh. Suddenly, a large white mist filled the air. The air temperature that had been rising due to the incendiary bombs fell below zero in just a few seconds. Even the steel plates on the ground were covered with a thin layer of white mist. Frost. Although the emergency cooling tank of the power armor is filled with liquid nitrogen, the liquid nitrogen is not sprayed directly on the overheated parts. Instead, it is used to cool down the coolant in the copper tube first, and then the coolant is used to absorbing the heat given off by those overheated components. If liquid nitrogen is directly in contact with hot metal, severe thermal expansion and cold contraction will cause the metal to embrittle and crack. This is like amplifying the effectiveness of the conventional quenching process hundreds of times. Only a few top-quality materials can withstand such torture. At the same time, Kaylan raised the gun in his hand and blasted the sensor alarm on the ceiling with 2 blasts. He didn't want the entire icebreaker to come and watch this scene. Back off. Everyone back off. Leave the range of the white mist, Kaylan shouted to several other people while quickly retreating. The field of vision in the white mist is extremely limited. If this move fails to eliminate the black skeleton, this white mist will provide the opponent with an excellent ambush site. Did you kill it? Caroline looked at Kaylan, who was the last one to exit the white mist. Everything she discovered just now was so sudden that she didn't even react. Not sure. Kaylan shook his head. It can go head-to-head with a war blade made of nano alloy. The strength of the material of the skeleton is definitely not low. I can't guarantee that this method will be effective. Anyway, you still have to remain vigilant until the white mist dissipates. Kaylan retreated behind Asano Akira. Compared to nano alloy, his body was much more fragile. After about 10 minutes, the white mist in the cargo hold finally dissipated, and the skeleton was seen lying motionless on the ground. The spine and humerus were covered with fine cracks, and the ribs were even broken. Everything is broken. Kaylan picked up a small stone at his feet and threw it over. The stone hit the skeleton and bounced to the ground. The black skeleton remained motionless. Is it dead? Liao Zilang wanted to put away the folding shield, but Kaylan raised his hand to stop him. Don't be careless, maybe this thing is pretending to be dead. Thinking of the previous ambush, Kaylan didn't dare to take it lightly now. The weapons in the hands of the 4 people were all aimed at the black skeleton, and they moved closer step by step. Nothing happened until Asano Akira picked up the black skeleton with the tip of his knife. There seems to be something inside this skeleton, said the sharp-eyed Liao Zilang. Is it bone marrow? Caroline couldn't help but move closer. It doesn't look like that. Kaylan shook his head, picked a handy stone from the pile of rocks nearby, aimed it at the spine of the black skeleton, and smashed it down hard. Crack. The cracked bones were very fragile. With just one blow, many bone fragments were knocked off. Kaylan repaired it a few more times, and soon opened a hole about 1 centimeter in diameter in the vertebrae. Turn the light over. A ray of extremely bright white light shot out from the shoulder of the power armor and shone on this vertebrae. I saw that the place where the spinal cord should have been was filled with a pale white translucent substance. Through the surface of this thing, something similar to organ tissue could be vaguely seen. It looks like a slug. Caroline whispered, is this its true form? Slugs, whose scientific name is slugs, are hermaphroditic mollusks classified into gastropods and stalks. They were extremely common on the Earth in the Old Era, but on the Ark, only a handful of them were preserved in biological laboratories. Living samples, compared to cockroaches that can survive on the surface of Alpha Star for a long time, this creature's ability to adapt to the environment is much weaker. Just a little bit of high-concentration salt solution is enough to dehydrate it to death. Although it looks like a slug, it is definitely a native creature of planet Alpha. Kaylan pursed his lips. This should be the thing that drives the black skeleton. Indeed, it was too fast, but how did it escape the Security Bureau's screening? Caroline said, no matter how I think, I can't figure out how this thing could appear here. I'm afraid the people from the Security Bureau can't explain this problem clearly. Kaylan spread his hands and said, but the problem now is how to deal with this thing. We can't hand it over to the Security Bureau, right? That's not okay. If the Security Bureau finds out that we opened cargo hold number 9, even the captain will be in trouble. Caroline shook her head repeatedly. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 65. Then we must do a good job of confidentiality. I think your Soma Consortium should also have its own biological laboratory, right? Kaylan secretly laughed in his heart. If the Soma Consortium can be brought to the opposite side of the Security Bureau, what will happen to them? The next action will definitely be beneficial without any harm. If they were originally walking a tightrope, then with the help of the Soma Consortium, this tightrope could be replaced by a relatively easy-to-walk single-plank bridge. As for confronting the Security Bureau head-on, Kaylan didn't even think about it. It was neither possible nor necessary. After all, they just wanted to save people and had no intention of rebelling. It is impossible for the Soma Consortium to go against the Security Bureau or even the entire Ark for little hunters like them. As the owner of the Pioneer icebreaker, the Soma Consortium only needs to provide them with some small conveniences, which is enough. As a large and ambitious consortium, even if the main development direction of the Soma Consortium is not in biotechnology, a brand new Alpha Star species still has a huge temptation for them. Whether they start research on their own, or use it as a trading chip, this can definitely be regarded as a considerable fortune. You mean, let us deal with this thing? Although Caroline has never stated her background, it is obvious that she, like Captain Sophia, is also a member of the Soma Consortium. Yes. You should contact Miss Soma right now and ask her to send a few trustworthy people here to take this thing back to the consortium headquarters. You must act quickly. It is best to send a plane back today. Even if it is safe by then, the Bureau was aware of it, and they had no time to recover the things. I think no matter how arrogant the Security Bureau agents were, they would not force their way into your biological laboratory, Kaylan said. As for the subsequent quarrels, we don't need to worry about it. I think any consortium should have a group of people specifically responsible for such matters. How to turn black into white, and some into white? No, they are more professional than us, Kaylan continued. But, all the planes on the ship were destroyed in the battle with the deep-sea giant eels, and we don't have any usable ones now. Caroline said with a confused look on her face. That's not a problem, Kaylan said immediately. Isn't the Aurora Consortium's transport ship leaving yet? It's entirely possible to secretly send the safe containing the biological samples back to the Ark in the name of transporting seriously injured people. Is this really feasible? Caroline looked hesitant, but in fact, she had been persuaded by Kaylan. Originally, the Soma Consortium had an attitude of daring to get angry and dare not speak out against the forced intervention of the Security Bureau. But now, if this thing can be sent back, it will not only create benefits for the consortium, but also be regarded as getting rid of the Security Bureau's hands. He regained some face. Whether things can be done or not depends on your people. Ian's meaning couldn't be clearer. He is only responsible for passing on favors, and the rest of the trouble must be solved by the Soma Consortium. Anyway, for him, this thing is not only worthless, but also a hot potato. They can neither turn this thing over to ARC in exchange for credits, nor can they sell it on the black market. Instead, they have to be constantly on guard against searches by the Security Bureau. Assuming that the Soma Consortium doesn't want this thing, the best way Kaylan can think of is to throw it into the sea. Okay, I understand. I'll contact the captain right away. Seeing that Caroline had finally made up her mind, Kaylan was relieved. Being able to convince the first mate was already half the battle. Next, it depends on the attitude of the beautiful captain. At this time, Kaylan suddenly discovered that the black hole in his brain that almost swallowed up his self-consciousness had disappeared. Not only that, but even the lost Alpha civilization language ability had returned to him. How is this going? He subconsciously looked at the mutilated skeleton lying on the ground. Could it be because this thing was killed? I had just invaded its consciousness very briefly, so at the same time, could this thing also invade my consciousness? In fact, this is a two-way invasion. Could it be that the black hole of consciousness is caused by this thing? Now it's dead, so the black hole is gone. This explanation seems to be completely feasible, although it is a bit far-fetched, but other than that, Kaylan can't think of the second possibility. However, this incident also served as a reminder to him that he would never easily try to communicate with the creatures on Alpha Planet in the future. If he was really succeeded by that black hole, the consequences would be unimaginable. It can range from going crazy to losing oneself and turning into a living puppet. Okay, the captain has agreed. She asked us to keep watch in the cargo hold. Someone will come down soon. Caroline walked over and said to Kaylan. From the time she called Zofia until now, only in just 5 minutes, this decisive behavior was exactly the same as when he implemented the bait tactic before. Kaylan and the others didn't have to wait long. With the sound of boot soles and metal ladders clattering, 5 men in crew uniforms descended to the bottom of the ship and walked into cargo hold number 9. Are you the hunter Miss Soma mentioned? The leader was a short and stocky old man. His hair and beard were gray. He looked to be over 60 years old at least, but he has well-developed muscles that are completely inconsistent with his age, and his two strong arms are even thicker than Ian's thighs. Old Rail? Why did you come down in person? That engine room, Caroline said with a look of surprise. With the second and third tracks and those brats, nothing big will happen, the old man said calmly. Old ghost? There are 2 ghosts and 3 ghosts. This nickname is, quite unique, Kaylan muttered in a low voice. What the hell? It's an old man, not an old ghost. He's a railer. However, this time, Kaylan underestimated the other party's hearing. Even though he was more than 10 meters away, the old man could clearly hear what he was muttering. Sorry. Kaylan quickly apologized. At this time, Liao Zilang leaned into his ear and said, Hey, you don't know this, right? Lao Gui is another name for the chief engineer on the ship. His status is second only to the captain and half higher than the first mate level, and the second and third rails are his mates, which is equivalent to the second mate and the third mate. There is even a saying among many crew members, above the deck, the captain is in charge, and below the deck, the senior rail officer is in charge. Liao Zilang has been working in the airport since he was a child, and the personnel structure and management methods of airships mostly follow those on sea ships in the old era, so Liao Zilang knows more about these things than Kaylan and the others, who are hunters. As long as you understand it, since time is tight, let's get down to business. Lao Gai waved his hand impatiently. The captain said that you have encountered a monster you have never seen before, which is this pile of rotten bones on the ground. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 66. To be precise, it's something in the bones, Kaylan said seriously. It looks a bit like a semi-finished industrial gel. Lao Guy squatted on the ground and took out a pair of rubber gloves from the toolbox he brought. He was halfway wearing them when he seemed to remember something. Suddenly he turned his head and looked at Kaylan. This thing shouldn't be toxic or corrosive, right? Not sure, we haven't had direct contact. Kaylan shook his head. Then it's better to be careful. Lao Gui's expression was very serious. I still want to live for another 10 or 20 years. He took out a long-handled metal pliers and picked up the remains of the black skeleton one by one into an insulated bucket with the words spare plasma, Rh negative of blood on it. Even a fragment the size of a grain of rice was not put away. Pass. You guys all go and look around to see if there is anything that has jumped far away, although the grandsons of the Security Bureau will know about this sooner or later. At least they can't catch the tail. Also, fourth brother, Quinn, you should deal with all the marks on the ground. If there are any areas that cannot be wiped clean, just pour some dilute hydrochloric acid on them and then brush them with detergent. If those guys come back in the future, just say that the rust has been removed. Anyway, if we insist on refusing to let go, there is nothing they can do. Yes, the two crew members who followed Lao Gui responded. At this time, Kaylan noticed that the man named Quinn was the man who went to catch Bartelti in the restaurant before. Hey, aren't you, the roasted leek? When Quinn passed by Kaylan, he also recognized him, but... What the hell is this roasted leek? Kaylan asked speechlessly. Oh, I don't know what your name is. Didn't you treat me to a plate of roasted leeks that day? Later, that guy kept talking about how I caused him to lose a bottle of Roland. This is a shameful thing. He only had it all day long. Remember to eat and drink. Is boss okay now? Kaylan asked casually. Although the casualties on the Pioneer were heavy, they were probably not embarrassed enough to send the logistics personnel to the front line. You can't die. Quinn waved his hand. Injured? Well, when those beasts collided with the ship, a metal railing in the engine room broke and injured his shoulder. He should be lying in the dormitory now, Quinn said while using a piece of alcohol solvent. The sea wiped the floor. As long as it's nothing serious, remember to tell him next time that I won't default on the wine I owe him. Then you'd better talk to him yourself. I'm going back to the headquarters with Lao Gui, and by the way, I'm taking the paid leave I've saved for 1.5 years. Damn, to be honest, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be able to do this time. All the people on this ship have to be accounted for here. Suddenly I am absolutely sure that what Lao Ba said is quite right. The most painful thing in life is when people die and money is not spent. This guy has no education, but what he said is it really makes sense. Actually, he didn't say this. Who said that? More than 1,000 years ago, a Chinese sketch actor said this on an old-era entertainment program called the Spring Festival Gala. Damn, it turns out to be like this. I wonder how a dog can spit out ivory from its mouth. Quinn looked stunned. Okay. Don't just chat, hurry up and work. Lao Guy finally collected all the debris. He even rummaged through the pile of rocks twice, except that the floor was almost gone. Turned over. The metal thermal insulation barrel containing the black skeleton remains was not locked, and was simply affixed with 2 seals. It was blatantly carried by Lao Guy in his hand. This made Kaylan a little worried. Do you need to find a box or something to put it in? Get up. This is too obvious. It's easier to attract attention when you hide it, Lao Gui said solemnly. One of the wounded people sent back happened to have panda blood, and this bucket of emergency plasma was prepared for him. Then what if the injured person really bleeds profusely? It was just a scratch on his skin. There was no need to send him back with this kind of injury. Lao Guy suddenly coughed symbolically and continued, but I accidentally broke my leg just now, so I'm afraid there will be sequelae. so I decided to go back to Ark to receive more comprehensive treatment. Kaylan couldn't help but cursed, "I'm afraid you broke this leg on purpose. Don't look at me like that. That kid volunteered, and the consortium has given him enough compensation. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll go up first. The Aurora Consortium's transport ship will leave soon." "Okay, I wish you all a safe journey," Kaylan said with a smile. "Oh, by the way, Caroline, you have to be wary of them. This kid is far smarter than you think, but seeing as the benefits are all ours this time, I don't care about what little calculations he has in mind. Don't let people sell it and then count the money for it after." Laogoi finished speaking, he glanced at Kaylan with a threatening look. "Hee, mutual benefit, a win-win situation." Kaylan smiled awkwardly, but received a cold snort from the old man. "Well, I understand, be careful on the road." Caroline nodded hurriedly. Judging from her respectful and submissive attitude, the old man's prestige on the ship is probably higher than that of the beautiful captain. Kaylan couldn't help but feel relieved. If this old guy stayed on the ship, it would be difficult for his next actions to go as smoothly as expected. Fortunately, he was leaving soon, leaving Miss Soma and this one. First Mate Caroline is much easier to deal with. Let's put this matter to rest first. We've been down for so long and we haven't even had a good look at the diving cabin. Watching Laogoi and the others leave, Kaylan turned around and said to Caroline, "Ah, I almost forgot to bring you down here mainly to see the diving cabin." Caroline said, a little embarrassed, "Also, although that old man looks fierce, he is actually very nice." "Yes, don't pay attention to those words just now. It's okay, I can also see that the old man is a sharp talker." Kaylan smiled and waved his hand. "Besides, what Laogoi said is right. I really want to sell a favor to the Soma Consortium. After all, I have to eat your food on the ship these days, because eating people has short mouths. Including the rescue operation just now, our Soma Consortium already owes you a lot," Caroline whispered. "It's just a piece of cake. Besides, our destination this time is the Pioneer. We can't just watch the Pioneer sink in front of us, right?" Kaylan said this, but in his heart he was thinking that he wished he could let the Pioneer sink. The more they owe themselves, the more convenience they can get on the Pioneer. Anyway, this is mutual benefit, a win-win situation. The two of them were chatting and had already walked to the diving cabin. Compared with the blurry video, the shock that the real thing brought to Kaylan was much stronger. It was a small object with a diameter of about 4 meters. The spherical diving chamber was about 3 meters long, but at this moment it was no longer spherical. An indescribable force twisted the outer shell of the diving chamber into a twist-like shape. The surface of the high-strength alloy that could withstand the heavy pressure of deep water was covered with there were horrific strangulation marks, and several compression cylinders were all crushed into thin discus. It is really hard to imagine what kind of monster it encountered underwater. Fortunately, there is a flexible protective bag inside the diving cabin, so the body of the deceased is relatively intact, otherwise, it would probably be filled with a pile of minced meat. Caroline said at the side. The lining structure of the diving cabin, the various equipment inside, and the flexible protective bag that Caroline mentioned were all removed by the Security Bureau, leaving only a bare iron shell, and the underwater propeller was completely crushed. No one knows what they encountered underwater, but I think the monster that can turn the diving cabin into this should be more terrifying than the giant eel in the deep sea. Caroline sighed, "You really want to going down?" Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 67. Let's talk about this. Kaylan knelt down and put his upper body into the diving cabin. If there is danger, we will choose to give up. I'm afraid it will be too late when we encounter danger, Caroline said angrily. Why are these people so ungrateful? So many people have already died, and they want to get together and kill another wave of people. Such nice words can't persuade a damn ghost. Just when Caroline was thinking about how to make them give up this idea completely, Ian's voice suddenly came from the diving cabin. "First Officer Caroline, are you sure that the people from the Security Bureau have really carefully inspected this diving cabin?" His tone was very strange, as if he had seen something incredible. "Yeah, what's wrong?" Caroline controlled the power armor and squatted down, looking into the diving cabin. "There are some things carved on the inner wall of the diving cabin." "Give me the flashlight," Kaylan said. Liao Zilang immediately found a flashlight and handed it in. "How is it possible?" Caroline was very surprised. If there was really something carved on the inner wall of the diving chamber, the people from the Security Bureau must have directly cut off the steel plate and took it away. There is absolutely no reason to leave it there. Here, could it be that they didn't discover these things? That makes even less sense. "What's engraved on it?" she couldn't help but ask. It was a line of crooked English letters, and the font was extremely deformed. The engraver seemed to be in an extremely mentally unstable state when he carved the line of letters, and several letters even overlapped. However, Kaylan still managed to identify these letters. All the letters together formed exactly 3 words. "Leave the bed." "Leave the bed," Kaylan read it word by word. "Leave this bed." Caroline was stunned. She knew every word and could understand the sentences they formed together. However, in the current situation, this sentence made her completely confused. "I was confused. What does this mean?" "Bed does not necessarily mean a bed for sleeping, it also means a seabed," Kaylan said solemnly, "so the meaning of this sentence should be to keep us away from that seabed. This is a warning." Kaylan always felt that something was wrong, that he seemed to have missed some important details, but he couldn't figure out what went wrong that made him/her have this strange feeling. Is it because people from the Security Bureau didn't erase or take away this clue? No. He has already taken this doubt into consideration, but the strange feeling does not come from this. Warning, Caroline thought for a moment, was it left by the deceased? On the verge of death in despair. This possibility cannot be ruled out. Kaylan nodded slightly. His fingers were tracing along the handwriting of these letters, trying to restore the mental state of the carver at that time. No, that emotion did not look like despair. A person in despair would not have the heart to carve such a warning on the inner wall of the diving chamber. What's more, the deceased was an elite agent of the Security Bureau. This kind of person has received very cruel psychological training. If there is any warning before dying, if there is any information left by the opportunity, they will only choose useful information as much as possible instead of this kind of unclear warning. Moreover, these handwritings are not coherent. For example, in the letter H, there is a distance of 4 or 5 centimeters between the vertical line on the left and the vertical line on the right. If it were not for the 2 letters T in the front and E in the back, it is difficult for ordinary people to associate these notches with the letter H. Kaylan also thought at first whether this might be caused by the turbulence of the environment, but then he noticed that the depth of these scratches were almost the same, which meant that they were made in a relatively stable environment. If it is engraved, it can only be the problem of the engraver to make the letters difficult to read. It's so weird. Kaylan repeated these handwritings over and over again, and he suddenly discovered that these twisted letters were very much like the handwriting of children when they first started to learn to write. In the minds of those children, there was not even the concept of words and symbols. They just regard it as a special picture. There is neither the order of the strokes nor the structure of the font. Each letter looks like a ghost drawing. The letters engraved on the inner wall of the diving chamber look exactly like this. This situation should not happen to a sane and non-illiterate adult human. For Kaylan himself, reading and writing have almost become instincts. Even when he is drowsy, he writes with his eyes closed. The characters are much easier to recognize than these letters. Etc. Instinct, lack of instinct. Kaylan was suddenly startled. He had just experienced this unspeakable painful feeling once. Could it be that the person who carved the letter had a similar experience? Could all this have anything to do with that black skeleton? Thinking of this, Kaylan immediately said to Caroline, "By the way, when will we know the analysis report of the black skeleton just now? To be honest, I am actually very curious about that kind of monster. It will take at least half a day to send the things back, and a series of related procedures will also take half a day. As for the analysis report, it won't come out until the day after tomorrow at the earliest." Caroline thought for a moment and replied, "Okay, if the report comes out, please notify me immediately." In the next hour, Kaylan carefully checked the diving cabin again, but except for the warning engraved on the inner wall, he could not find any valuable clues. Those people from the Security Bureau were so crazy that they didn't even leave a hair on their head, but why did they let the warning on the inner wall stay there? Although the letters are difficult to identify, they are so conspicuous that there is no reason why they should not be discovered. Or, after the people from the Security Bureau left, this line of letters still didn't appear on the inner wall. Thinking of this possibility, Kaylan suddenly felt the hairs on his back stand up. If that's the case, then who carved these letters? First Officer Caroline, has anyone else entered this cargo hold before us? I mean after the people from the Security Bureau sealed this place. No. Caroline shook her head decisively. If you want to open the cargo hold, you can only use this key card, but this key card has always been placed in the cabinet in the captain's cabin. Although the entire number 9 cargo bay is not small, the entire space is still visible at a glance. Apart from the only door, there are no other passages. The only ventilation duct is only 15 centimeters in diameter, and the ducts are all welded with steel wire. It is impossible to use it as a secret passage if it is dead. I mean, is it possible that someone stole the key card, or opened the hatch in some other way? The captain's cabin is monitored. If someone sneaks in, they will definitely be discovered. As for opening the hatch in other ways, it will directly trigger the alarm system. In other words, we are the first people to enter Cargo Bay 9 after the people from the Security Bureau leave. Yes, what exactly do you want to ask? Caroline said with a hint of helplessness in her tone. Do you think these letters are a prank by a certain crew member? Please, no one would do such a boring thing. And still risk being fired. Maybe I'm overthinking. Before leaving the number 9 cargo bay, Kaylan glanced at the diving cabin for the last time. He always felt that he was almost able to come into contact with the truth, but it was just a little bit short. One step away, but he still couldn't step out of this fog. No prizes for guessing who do you think carved these letters. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 68. On the first floor of the Pioneers Bridge, VIP room number 1. Seeing Kaylan and the others pushing the door open, the hound who was drinking tea immediately jumped up from the sofa. He didn't even bother to pay attention to the precious tea leaves and hot tea in the bone china cup, and hurriedly greeted him. Come up. How's it going? Did you find anything? No. Kaylan shook his head, and things have become more complicated. Then, he recounted what happened in cargo bay number 9 and threw the 2 magnetic cards on the coffee table. This is what the captain insisted on giving to me. There are 5 million credit points in each bearer savings card. You can take it, old dog, and it will be used as compensation for your purchase of equipment. Let's not talk about money. Hound waved his hand. Our problem now is not money, nor that black skeleton, nor that weird warning. I just want to know one thing, in the video that container, whether it contains what we want. If not, I think we have to recompare the risks and benefits of this operation. The hound paused, looked directly into Ian's eyes and said, you are the only one who saw that thing coming out of a person's stomach with your own eyes. If even you are not sure. I'm not sure, but judging from the witnesses' descriptions, The container in the diving cabin has exactly the same characteristics as the container in that settlement. Kaylan hesitated for a moment, then replied. But no one can guarantee that it is what we want. In fact, the girl named Caroline is right. The danger of the sea area is far beyond our expectation. When we want to regret it, I'm afraid it's too late. Hound sat back on the sofa and glanced at the silent Natasha from the corner of his eye. On one side is Ivan's life, and on the other side are you, me, Liao Zilang, Leighton, and Akira Asano. Zwilligitu and Natasha have 7 lives? I really want to save Ivan, but I can't let others risk their lives just to save one person. Old dog, failure of the operation will not necessarily lead to death. We may still have a chance to retreat. Leighton was just halfway through his words when he was glared at by the Hound. There are dozens of people entering the water one after another. Have they ever had a chance to retreat? The Hound shouted coldly. The operation must continue, yes, but we must make sure there is nothing we want under the water, and, after we go down, can we come back alive? The information about that thing has been completely blocked by the Security Bureau. Kaylan turned around and closed the door of the VIP room, but it's not like they didn't leave any clues. You mean the black skeleton you encountered? Yes, Kaylan nodded. The people from the Soma Consortium have brought the thing back. The analysis report will be out the day after tomorrow. I think that thing is likely to be related to our goal. In addition, the previous few times the dive sites, hydrographic data, and marine animal activity patterns are all recorded on the ship, and I have asked Caroline to make a copy of them all for me. Kaylan took out a memory card the size of a fingernail from his pocket and inserted it into the holographic projector under the coffee table. The sacrifices of those in front are not entirely worthless. With the information they exchanged for their lives, the risks of this operation are actually not that exaggerated. A seabed formed by a 3-dimensional holographic projection appeared in front of everyone. It was densely marked with a large amount of data and notes. This information was accumulated bit by bit during the previous explorations. In addition to the sacrifices of dozens of people, the Pioneer also launched hundreds of unmanned detectors. Although only 1 out of 10 of these detectors could be successfully recovered, they still brought back a large amount of data. These black areas are all unexplored areas. In our next actions, we must avoid them as much as possible, and these areas marked in red are areas where high-threat sea beasts are found to be active. If we rush into it rashly, it is very likely that you will encounter a powerful monster. What about the blue area? The Hound asked aloud. Relatively safe area, at least none of the first few groups who entered the water had an accident in the blue area. I think it's still not possible. Hound shook his head. There are too few samples, the data lacks reliability, and the seabed environment is so complex. We can't guarantee that the previously safe areas will always be safe. As for sea beasts, nothing else. The deep-sea giant eel alone cannot compete with it with the weapons in our hands, let alone those stronger beings. There are still more than 120 hours, Kaylan glanced at the watch on his wrist, at least we can give it a try. You mean, reconnaissance in a small area first, and then gradually expand the search area? Yes, anyway, we are not sure whether there is really what we want in the deep sea. There is no need to put all our bets on one dive. Even if we just swim a few laps at a depth of about 100 meters to look for some clues, it will be enough. It's better than wasting time in the cabin. Kaylan nodded. What you said makes sense, but even at a depth of 100 meters, there is still a lot of risk. Who will go for the first test dive? Hound asked seriously. I'll go, Kaylan said immediately. Since I proposed the plan, I should execute it. It wasn't until he arrived in Zhonghai that Kaylan realized that this operation was much more difficult than he imagined. Otherwise, the Hound's opposition wouldn't be so obvious. But since he chose to persist, he would bear the brunt of the risk. Of course he has to bear it himself. No. Hound knocked on the table with his knuckles. I have no diving experience, my physical fitness is average among the rest of us, I haven't undergone physical strengthening and transformation, and I don't have any hard life-saving means. What do you mean? Be the first to dive? Are you going to die? The test dive is not that dangerous. I will not leave the Pioneer too far. If anything happens, you will have enough time to support me. Kaylan took a breath and continued, besides, among the few of us, I am the most familiar with the target, and I have even touched that thing with my own hands. If it were someone else, what would I do if I missed any clues? At first, the Hound wanted to refute Kaylan, but when Kaylan said the last reason, even the Hound fell silent. Indeed, no matter what the conditions are, he is not the most suitable candidate, but from this point alone, he is the only optimal solution. The Hound gritted his teeth and lowered his head and thought for 2 minutes. Then he exhaled a breath of air, raised his head and said, "Okay, I'll let you go for the first try, but you have to take Liao Zilang with me." Superior. In terms of physical resistance alone, Liao Zilang is the strongest among the team members, and he is also the only one among them who has had many diving experiences in Zhonghai. If you exclude that, he is actually the best among the vanguard. Candidate. Yes, boss. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 69. Pioneer, Starboard Deck. The sky over the Central Sea seems to always maintain its gloomy color. Thick lead gray clouds block a large amount of light and heat from the stars. As dusk falls, the sea surface temperature drops rapidly, and a small amount of thin ice floes begin to appear around it. The weather is cloudy, the sea surface temperature is -3 degrees Celsius, the water temperature 5 meters below the water is 4.5 degrees, the northerly wind is level 3 to level 4, the gust level is level 5 to level 6, and the visibility in the water is about 8 meters. To be honest, this kind of weather conditions is really not suitable for diving. A crew member assigned to assist them frowned and said, "The wind is not too strong, but the light is too dark. The further down you go, the lower the visibility will be, let alone 100 meters. It's already there, I guess you can't even see it at a depth of 50 meters. I want to ask, when was the last time you saw a sunny day?" Kaylan put his feet into the boots of the deep diving suit with some difficulty. The materials of the military-grade deep diving suit are very solid, and the weight is naturally also quite exaggerated. These boots alone weigh over 30 kilograms. That seemed to be 4 months ago. No, it should have been 5 months. How many months are you going to let us wait on the ship? No. That's not what I meant. I just wonder why you don't use a diving cabin. Although the defense of this equipment is very high, it is still incomparable to a 3-inch thick composite steel shell. Also, are you also planning to go into the water? Are you planning to go in wearing this? Compared to Ian's deep-sea diving suit, which was as thick as power armor, Liao Zilang only wore a diving suit made of reinforced composite fiber. This diving suit was so thin that it even showed off his muscle lines. Not only in this way, his ankles, wrists, and neck were not protected at all, and were directly exposed to the outside. Compared with the fully armed Kaylan, his behavior was no different from swimming naked. What, is there a problem? Liao Zilang glanced at him in confusion. Of course. Don't you know that the seawater on Alpha Planet is highly toxic? Seawater will not only corrode the skin and muscles, but also invade human tissue after entering the blood, causing various organ failures. We usually work on the deck. You have to wear a full set of protective clothing, just to avoid being stained by the seawater. In his eyes, Liao Zilang's outfit completely mistook Zhonghai for the man-made lake inside the Ark, and mistook the seawater, which was comparable to chemical weapons and contained high doses of radiation, for domestic water that had been filtered and purified many times in the human base, What's the difference between going into the water wearing something like this and committing suicide? That's you, I'm different from you, Liao Zilang said. What's the difference? Even a biochemically modified person can't dash. The crew member choked in the middle of his words, because Liao Zilang climbed over the guardrail and jumped into the sea. Quick! Get him out quickly. He was stunned at first, and then wanted to press the alarm device not far away. Rescue him within 2 minutes, maybe his life can be saved. Wait a minute, brother, don't worry. Leighton suppressed a smile and used his mechanical arm to stop the crew. Can't you take a look first? After Leighton said this, the crew member discovered that Liao Zilang was wearing a thin diving suit and had already swam around an ice floe. He didn't look like he was poisoned at all. How is that possible? He rubbed his eyes vigorously, with a look of astonishment on his face. As I said, he is very talented. Kaylan couldn't help but laugh. Okay, it's time to put me down. I can't jump like him while wearing this thing. The complete set of deep diving suit and supporting equipment weighs more than 200 kilograms. This thing does not have a full body driven frame like power armor. Underwater maneuvers completely rely on 28 sets of paddles installed throughout the body for propulsion. Weapons, but these things are useless on land. It was very difficult for Kaylan to complete even the simple action of raising his arm, let alone running and jumping. 2 steel cables were fixed on the shoulders of the deep diving suit. With the rotation of the pulleys, Kaylan and his equipment were hoisted into the air. This device was originally used to launch and recover the diving cabin. However, with slight modifications, it can also be used in heavy armored deep diving suits. The cantilever fixed to the pulley rotated 90 degrees horizontally, carrying Kaylan out of the side of the ship. He looked down and saw that the water under his feet was deep and dark, like an endless abyss, with no end in sight. Get ready to fall, Leighton gestured to Kaylan. After receiving the confirmation signal, the pulley began to rotate in the opposite direction, and the retracted steel cable was released again until Kaylan was completely submerged in the sea water. Until the air tightness check is completed, the propeller check is completed, and the oxygen supply pipe is unobstructed. Kaylan followed the inspection steps in the deep diving suit manual one by one, and Liao Zilang also swam to his side and helped him unfasten his shoulders. Lock catch. The heart rate is 78 beats per minute, the blood pressure is 74 to 110 millimeters of mercury, and the body temperature is 36.9 degrees Celsius. There is no physical discomfort. Kaylan glanced at the physical sign monitoring device installed on the inside of the helmet and said, "The heart rate is a little fast, are you nervous?" The hound's voice came from the earphones. They can still communicate at this distance. After Kaylan dives to a certain depth, the sea water containing a large amount of radiation and heavy metal ions it became an insurmountable barrier, completely cutting him off from the world above the water. If you want to maintain communication, you must use wired communication methods such as cables. However, in the complex underwater environment, it is not only difficult to ensure the normal operation of cables, but it can also easily become a burden for divers. A little bit, Kaylan replied. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down as much as possible. Although this test dive only went down to 100 meters, for safety reasons, the deep diving suit was still equipped with an injectable pressurizer, but I hope you won't use this thing, Hound said. Injectable pressurizer is the standard feature of this type of deep diving suit. It is generally used when the diving depth exceeds 400 meters. At that depth, the gas pressurization inside the deep diving suit alone cannot guarantee the life of the diver. Safe, this injectable booster must be used to regulate pressure in the body and can be used with muscle builders if necessary. But after all, humans are not deep-sea creatures. They do not have that kind of tyrannical body. Excessive internal pressure can easily cause damage to organs and internal bleeding. Even with various protective measures, the use time of injectable boosters cannot exceed 1 hour. Of course, High-level biochemical modified people can ignore this problem to a certain extent. Guys like Layton can last at least 4 or 5 hours. The low-light camera and infrared camera are operating normally, and the microsonar has been activated. Everything is ready to start diving. Happy New Year to all. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi San. Chapter 70. The engine on the back of the deep diving suit began to make a subtle buzzing sound, and the air in the airbags on both sides was expelled at an even speed. As the buoyancy decreased, Kaylan began to slowly sink to the depths. Beep, the first communication test starts now. Liao Zilang gently moved his arm to distance himself from Kaylan, and the communication signal between the two began to weaken rapidly in the process. Until about 25 meters away, only the sizzling noise of electricity. At the end of the test, at a water depth of 10 meters, the maximum distance of the AF-6 single-to-single communicator is 22 meters. The AF-6 type is the most powerful portable wireless communication equipment they can purchase. On the land of Alpha Star, without strong interference sources and without the use of communication base stations, the maximum one-to-one communication distance can reach 1,000 more than 400 meters, but underwater, this distance is compressed to only 22 meters. Electromagnetic waves will be severely attenuated in water, and the seawater on Alpha Star contains a lot of radiation interference. It is already very difficult to achieve the figure of 22 meters. As for acoustic communication equipment, it will also be affected. For example, the microsonar carried by Kaylan has an effective distance of only about 100 meters. This is why they chose the number 100 meters for the test diving depth. Liao Zilang swam over and gave Kaylan an everything is normal gesture, and the two began to continue diving. Less and less light can penetrate the sea water, and the surrounding environment is already pitch black. Neither Kaylan nor Liao Zilang turned on the lighting equipment. In this environment, the light source is too eye-catching and can easily attract hunters who are very sensitive to light. Although darkness is full of unknown dangers, it is also can be their disguise. Of course, they still carry lighting equipment, but this equipment is not handheld. This method is too dangerous and is equivalent to actively exposing their position. The correct way to use it is to use compressed air to eject the flares. When necessary, it can even attract the attention of sea beasts in this way, so as to wait for an opportunity to escape. However, the lack of light does not mean that Kaylan has become completely blind. Underwater, hearing is far more important than vision. The miniature sonar hanging on the belt emits ultrasonic waves in all directions every 3 seconds, and by analyzing the received echoes, the surrounding environment is depicted on Kaylan's eyepiece with a 3-dimensional image. But so far, surrounded by seawater, the only abnormal object was Liao Zilang, who was diving with Kaylan. It's 80 meters deep. How are you doing? Kaylan asked Liao Zilang. Although the other party was not wearing a fully enclosed helmet, he relied on an improved underwater throat microphone to pass through the throat bone even without opening his mouth. Vibration to complete the communication. Fortunately, I can't feel the water pressure at all. Liao Zilang's head was down, his arms were close to both sides of his body, and his legs together were swinging up and down like the tail fins of fish. Unlike Kaylan, who needed help, external force, for him, whether he is floating up or down, is as if there is no resistance. His body is like a part of the sea water, and the sea water is an extension of his body. 90 meters. Kaylan glanced at the depth gauge and began to fill the airbag with gas. Only by keeping gravity and buoyancy in a relatively balanced state could he maintain a stable depth in the water. Did you find anything? Liao Zilang swam behind Kaylan, and then grabbed the shoulder buckle of the deep diving suit. Although this was far from his limit, out of caution, he had to try his best. The deep diving suit is driven by a propeller anyway, so as long as the crystals are not used up, the power will never run out. No, the sonar didn't scan anything. It's still a long way from the seabed. Kaylan stared at the image in front of him and said, Now let's start the second step and explore the horizontal layer. I felt a little uncomfortable today, and I had some issues. In the end, I only managed half a chapter. The missing half will be filled in tomorrow. I couldn't stay up late due to physical reasons, so I went to bed first. I hope everyone can understand.